People ask me, and I've said this before, well, how do you make a lot of money? How do you build a big business? And my answer has always been solve a big problem. The bigger problem you solve, the more value you're going to create.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Our guest today is going to help you. And if you're a developer or you're in real estate business, he's going to help you think through some of the qualities that you need to be successful. And one of those, I'm going to give you a little hint, is reimagining what something could be, what a piece of property could be. He's going to walk through that process, even working with the city and a few things you need to know to be successful at that, right? There are some things you need to know, even some metrics that he uses before you go into a city or county or place that you are thinking about developing a project. Our guest today is Ari Rastegar. Leveraging his 10 plus years of institutional real estate investing, Ari founded Rastigar Property Company with a single mission: to make it simple to access high quality, recession resilient, income producing real estate investments. He specializes in working with high net worth individuals and institutional partners to build real estate portfolios in fast growing markets designed to reduce risk and providing strong returns. Forbes recently labeled him the Oracle of Austin. You're going to hear a lot today about how he has grown quickly in Texas. He's doing some big stuff, and he's going to lay out some things for you today so you can do the same thing in your community. Ari, welcome to the show. Honored to have you on. I know you've done some big things in this space, and even talking to you a little bit before the show, I'm excited about learning about this reimagining the best uses for these projects. And you kind of coined that to some degree and have done so well at it. But tell the listeners a little more about who you are, and let's dive into what that means.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it. This is exciting. Really liked a lot of the content and the things that you've done over these past couple of years. So this is definitely going to be fun. A little bit about me. I flipped burgers through high school, delivered pizzas through college. I don't think they were going to let me into college. I had to go to 2 community colleges before getting into Texas A&M and use my scholarship money and a $3,000 loan to start my company. And now we've, invested and exited successfully in 38 cities, 12 states, 7 different asset classes. We're one of the most prolific buyers and owners in the Austin MSA, which happens to be my hometown. That's kind of what I do. And kind of who I am is I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a CEO, I'm a brother. And, those roles, I'm a friend. And those are the roles that define, who I am. But also the work that I do is truly ingrained into what I was meant to be doing. So I feel very fortunate that I found what my job is here, on this planet. And I see that as really community enhancement more than anything, like looking at a community, looking maybe at an old building or a piece of land. And as you said, reimagining what it could be to better serve the future of what that community is. Like we always, kind of say internally, we honor the past as we build the future. And it's something we enjoy. I'm being an attorney by trade. I really enjoy the game of going there and speaking to city and speaking to staff and working with, with the local permitting authorities to rezone properties, to think of them differently, understand where the cities or the towns are going, and seeing how we can help, how we can be, a part of that growth, but doing it in a prudent way. I've used the term and heard the term a lot, conscious capitalism. Like there's a way that you can create alpha for your investors at the same time creating a great user experience, for your tenants as well. And that's what we've definitely endeavored to do. And I think we've achieved it certainly in a few instances.
Nice. I appreciate you just elaborating on who you are a little bit. Most people don't go from flipping burgers to an attorney to, to where you're at today, right? I mean, and I know that didn't come easy.
Well, they told me I had ADD and some sort of deficit. And, I heard someone call it ADA one day, and was attention deficit advantage. And so ever since then, I've kind of, embraced thought.
I love that. Yeah. It's so much about your mindset, right? Around what that means.
That's all you got. It happens between these few inches, between these 2 ears.
So you mentioned, reimagining, what a property could be. You talked about, seeing what the future of the community could be. But then also, you said this kind of in passing, you said you enjoy this, you enjoy, going to the city and seeing how you can help, right? And I think that's crucial, just even that thought process of enjoying it for one, but two, with the mindset of how can I help? Right? Okay, city, how can I help? Well, obviously that changes their mindset on helping you, probably help them, right? But I want you to be able to elaborate a little bit on what does that mean to reimagine what it could be and even seeing the future for the community. What does that look like? And walk us through that process a little bit, because that's crucial for a real estate developer, as you're growing in a community like you're in.
Yeah, well, I can, give you a little case study.
Please.
So if you look at Kyle, Texas, as an example, and, some of the listeners might not know where Kyle is, but it's about, I guess, as they say, the crow flies, about 15 miles south of Austin, Texas. So if you look at I-35, which is the main corridor that literally goes from Mexico, Texas border all the way to Chicago, and it connects, San Antonio to Austin to Dallas. And it's, really kind of the central vein of Texas. And if you look at where Austin is and you go a little bit south, you get to the city called Kyle. Well, Kyle last year was ranked the #1 fastest growing city in the United States of America. And Hayes County, where Kyle is located, is the fastest growing county. A little trivia of Kyle is that in 2009, they got their first stoplight.
Wow.
Yeah. So as Austin has begun to grow, when you see the announcements of headquarters such as Tesla, where we own 50 acres next to them, we're building a 600,000 square foot industrial plant. Back to that point of how can you help, right? You talk about a growing city. Well, a growing city needs supply chain logistics help. A growing city that has transients or people that are moving, they're going to need apartments or build for rent housing. And it's really being responsive to, what those needs are versus trying to push your agenda, and I've found that it's kind of like surfing, right? Like you're not going to beat the ocean. Like I'm not going to beat a wave, but if I can learn to ride the wave, if I can learn to be, a part of that ecosystem, we find that it not only creates a higher probability of success, it also creates an environment that has more enjoyment, has more fulfillment, for the community, for the tenants and all people involved. And with that same ethos, when we looked at Kyle, there's this 200-acre parcel that, has been a farm for 100 years, basically. And we were able to kind of look at that location and the adjacent 118 acres. So it makes up about 318 acres, combine those two sites together. And by really analyzing the city and seeing the growth, we realized that there was really a need for an elementary school. The high school is, you can almost throw a rock and, effectively hit it, not with this arm, but someone, with a strong arm. And figuring out, how can you create something in a post-COVID world that will make people feel safe, comfortable, and also at a price point that's not cost prohibitive. So we went to the city, spoke with them, unbelievable people that, on the council and staff. I mean, I give so much credit to the mayor, certainly, and Kyle, the leadership that they brought, because when you look at a growing business or a growing city, not having much business is a big problem, but also having too much business too quick is also a problem as well. A high quality problem, but a problem nonetheless. So in looking there, we imagined this idea of, of a master plan community that would have, maybe a cool brewery or like a barbecue, also having maybe a boutique grocery store, an elementary school, pocket parks, a 60-acre green space that you could have, go hiking or go on walks, or in essence, for a growing family or, for young adults looking to either rent or purchase an area where they wouldn't really have to leave their neighborhood if they didn't want to. They can get their coffee, they can grab, a great barbecue, they can walk the kids to the school, they can walk to the high school. And we believe in this concept, called, futuristic suburbanism, like this post-COVID world of like, what does that mean to live? What does it mean to kind of own homes? And is there a way to create that at a price point, that not only serves our investors, but serves that end user tenant and creates an element of stickability? And I'll give you one example. When you look at the architecture, and we do all of the architectural design, conceptualization, all in-house, and then, bring on some strategic partners for architects of record and some fantastic consultants. But we do this imagination, for, lack of a better explanation, in-house. And when we looked at the design of the houses, you look at the typical nuclear family, call it tract home, and there's a dining room, there's a living room, there's a bedroom, there's the whatever 2.5 bath, however you look at it. And we kind of came to the belief that nobody uses the dining room. People congregate because of technology and because of the way, sociologically we've evolved as people, because the study of real estate is as much understanding psychology and sociology as it is mathematics. And so marrying the human element with the mathematics, we believe, is pivotal to be able to create, the right experience and ultimately create value. So in this particular instance, we went to the city, worked with staff, and we were able to rezone and re-entitle the property to build over 1,000 houses, 1,400 multifamily units, 200,000 square feet of office, 50,000 square feet of commercial, 60 acres of green space, and an elementary school for the city. And when you look at the way that builds into the fabric of Kyle, it's allowed, a couple steps up from what a typical master plan community would be, and brought, or is bringing, I should say, as we put shovels in the ground come August, a new identity to Kyle that isn't Austin per se, isn't, San Antonio per se, is something that, staff and the mayor and the city had really envisioned. And we saw an opportunity to really aid in that process. So we had a plan of what we thought would work, but by talking with them and being responsive and listening, and not for any reason of, like self-interest, but truly listening. And I think that listening is kind of a lost art or a lost virtue. And it's amazing what happens, when you close your mouth, for a couple of minutes, certainly someone like me that doesn't close their mouth often, we were able to collaborate and create this concept. And you talk about creating value for investors, one of the most strategic ways to do that is by understanding entitlements and permitting. For example, taking a farm and turning it into a master plan community, there's instant value creation and risk mitigation before even putting a shovel in the ground. Right. And so that's always the key. So the difference between a gambler and an investor is how you manage downside risk, and so it is a way, by doing this permitting and going through this entitlement process, that you can create value and de-risk some of the inherent risk that comes into development. And, risk to me isn't a bad word per se. Everything has risk, right? People say, oh, this is guaranteed, and which is just asinine, because there could be lead in the water, or you can, God forbid, get hit by a car. Risk is in everything. So our ethos has always been capital preservation and risk mitigation, and the way that we have found to do that is to reimagine what these properties could be to serve a growing community, and do it at a price point where, you're delivering alpha, but not being a pig. Like there's that old saying on Wall Street, bulls make money, bears make money, pigs get slaughtered. So, when I look at, a deal, and we do our stress tests, we run the math, like we're not looking, and maybe this is counterintuitive, I shouldn't say this, but we're not looking to squeeze every single penny out of a deal. We're looking to go into it, do what's right for the community, make a healthy return, make sure the end user is happy, they have something, or have the proverbial meat kind of left on the bone. So everybody walks away, feeling like they really got to win. And it's amazing how that attitude and that mentality can lead to really special things that you might not have predicted.
Yeah, I was thinking about, or so many things you said there that we could talk about. But, when we think about Kyle specifically, you talked about the size of Kyle, just got the first stoplight, 2009. I grew up in a town that had one stoplight, and so I can relate somewhat maybe to, what Kyle was, and even the community I grew up in is experiencing quite a bit of growth, nothing like Kyle, but still the changes that start to take place, right? And I can imagine though, as understanding that community and some of the ways they think and whatnot, especially the families, man, they've been there a long time, right? And that change is difficult for many of them.
It is. It's resistant to that.
As you're going to the city, and I love how you focused on listening, right? It's so important. I was working with my oldest the other day. He loves to talk a lot. And it's like, man, when you can learn to listen.
I got 3 also, and trust me, I get it.
Yeah. And so, when you go to them though, and I'm thinking about working with that city, in the small town mindset, mentality, all those things, you're a developer coming in with all this experience. You can imagine these things, right? And see this growth potential and what's happening. Are they able to do that, or were they able?
Absolutely. I think I'm so glad you brought that up, because a lot of times, some of these, small towns, that becomes like this generalization where their small town means small minded. And I heard someone say, my father was an Iranian immigrant. My mother is German, and I'm kind of a tornado and a volcano, I think, mixed together, in some regard. But I heard this gentleman say the other day, who was talking about, was speaking in English, and he had an accent, and said, look, I might talk with an accent, but I don't think with an accent. That makes sense. So the folks in Kyle were not only unbelievably sophisticated, unbelievably just open-minded and caring. And you come to find that the smaller towns, believe it or not, counterintuitively, I have found, have more heart value. They understand, they have their hand, on like the beating pulse of what the city is, which allows us as developers to understand kind of where it is at that point and what kind of change could be sustainable, what could be viewed as gentrification. And I despise that word. Like, I cannot tell you how much, that word, how much baggage it grows, because I believe truly in community enhancement. But I wasn't surprised at all by the level of sophistication that was there personally, but a lot of people are, not for Kyle per se, but in these other small towns. But what I do find is you have a lot to learn in those smaller towns, because the folks that are there, like you said, have lived there themselves for years. They have family that have been there, and sometimes it's generational. So when you open up that dialogue, with true authenticity, and that's the key, is really listening, but really not, saying we listen or saying you want to build a long-term relationship, but really doing it. Go figure. Something special really happens.
Yeah.
And we've had some great experience there. So these types of situations, I don't see them as adversarial. I don't look at them adversarially. We have a project in Dallas, Texas at 1899 McKinney Avenue, which what I would argue is one of the most strategic locations in the entire city of Dallas, right on Clyde Warren Park. This unbelievable location in Uptown, where we went through the zoning process as well. And I personally went and met with over 100 condo building owners, myself personally, within the area, in order to, basically ask for affidavits of support, for what this zoning process would be. And again, going and listening and hearing the ideas that we got were stuff that we never would have thought of, that were so good, so smart, into where when we got to the end result of getting one of the largest upzones in the history of Dallas, Texas, what was beautiful about it was we felt like the community and the neighbors had ownership in it and felt the joy of what that could be, because they literally saw their ideas be incorporated into our position, so to speak, or, what our thesis was as we spoke to the zoning committee. It made it a process that, look, it's still called work. It's not necessarily, sitting on the beach in Tahiti. My grandpa used to say, if you pray for the rain, you got to deal with the mud.
I love that.
So yeah, that's it really, really in a nutshell. We're agnostic when it comes to the type of assets that we invest in. We're looking to, find deep value, and we've done so in self-storage, master plan communities. I know everybody talks about this retail apocalypse, which drives me crazy, because at the end of the day, people are still people, and, they're going to want to go shopping, not because they can buy it on Amazon for convenience, but because it's an experience. We've owned a significant amount of retail, sold the positions. Recently, we actually sold a restaurant, or I should say a building that housed a restaurant. We got it during COVID. The previous tenant went bankrupt. We repositioned it, reimagined it, and signed a fresh, 10-year lease with a fantastic local Austin restaurant. But again, I think this concept is very much lost, in real estate, in a lot of instances where people are just drilling into the numbers or drilling into what they believe the thing needs to be and just muscling that thing in, versus really truly zooming out and not being so self-centric and creating something that fills a void. And people ask me, and I've said this before, well, how do you make a lot of money? How do you build a big business? And my answer has always been solve a big problem.
Yeah.
The bigger problem you solve, the more money or whatever or more value you're going to create, however you slice it.
You talked about in the very beginning about, we talked about Kyle, we talked about reimagining, we talked about, working with the city and really listening well. And even the ideas that came from that, how valuable those were, which is so crucial. But anything else that you could add that would help us to recognize opportunities like Kyle? What did you see there? When did you see it? Did you see the growth coming? How did you do that?
Well, it's a great question. You're only as good as the data that you have, right? And so understanding, Mark Twain used to say that history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. And so by watching other cities that have grown, and I was an English major in undergrad, I'm a book nerd, I'm just a nerd all around. Honestly, I don't think I have a cool bone in my entire body, but honestly, when I look back at some of the growth of like a Silicon Valley and understanding how Silicon Valley became Silicon Valley, you start to see a pattern. Like you start to see how these cities were created. You can then take that pattern, have pattern recognition in these other types of cities, and you begin to see economic indicators. One of the big ones for Austin, as an example, was when Google Fiber was announced in 2013. So when you have the fastest internet in the world coming to Austin, which effectively was not even a city, I would say it's a town on steroids. You start to think, okay, well, if there's the fastest internet in the world is here, interesting. That means that technology companies have a reason to be here. You see the tax incentives. The GDP of Texas just surpassed the country of Brazil. So meaning you look at this high level first at 50,000 feet, you look at where the past was, and how those cities develop. And then you just start drilling down more and more and more. So you start that, and by the time you get down to 700 Bunton Lane, in Kyle, Texas for this property, you end up learning a lot. And you apply the things that you can apply and not. This particular one really wasn't rocket science, because when you have 165 people a day moving to Austin, Texas, and you look at all the major cities in the US, a 30, 40-minute commute is almost, is at the very least the average or nearing the mean for, working class, normal working class people. So Kyle is a 20-minute drive to Austin. And if you drive another 30 minutes, you hit San Antonio. So seeing the barbell between these two cities, you start to use a little.
It's a must that gets lifted, right?
Yeah. Meaning there's a certain amount of, common sense that gets in the room, and then you sharpen your pencils, obviously. So I wish I could tell you I had a crystal ball. It didn't take it. No, I think you. Yeah,
this
one, you could see that the growth was going because Austin was pricing and continues to price, native Austinites out of the market. And look, I grew up in the apartments that we buy. We're on an asset by asset level, not by number of doors, by number of properties. We have more apartment complexes. I think this is still true, more individual apartment complexes than any other private equity firm in the city. And so when you look at that, you look at the city that's growing and you see those rents really starting to escalate, and you look at the median income that individuals have, you can start to make assumptions of where the price needs to be for people to live, a good quality of life and what they're willing to do, or, what's actually feasible. And again, drilling into that human element, which I believe to be something that is something I'm proud of, quite frankly, that we look at as a firm in a very, very serious way. And then once we understand, or we believe we understand, the human element, that's when the math really starts and we start digging into, because we do, I would say less than 1% of the deals that we look at, so we have a 70-point due diligence protocol, proprietary protocol list that I created, over the last, 7 years. One of them being what I call the $5 Uber ride. So I kind of look at some of these apartment complexes that we renovate, and if it's within a $5 Uber ride of all the fun stuff, that's kind of one of the little boxes that we check.
That's awesome. All right. Unfortunately, time flies when we're having fun, right? I want to get to a few final questions.
Sure.
So tell us, what are some of the most important metrics that you track? And that can be professionally or personally, or a little bit of both.
That's a great question. So population growth is clearly one of the critical factors, but more importantly, job creation. And so it's one thing if people are moving, that's fine. But when you look at like Oracle moving their global headquarters to Austin, or Tesla moving their global headquarters, Facebook having their second largest office in the world, Google's second largest office in the world, you start to see, again, back to this kind of stickability of what will keep someone there. Because I'm not as concerned of how many people are coming. I'm concerned about why they would stay. And once we figure that we kind of understand that for the same reasons, Nashville, Raleigh, most parts of Florida, Phoenix, Arizona, the population migration trends and people fleeing the East and West Coast is because that's where employment is and there's a better kind of standard of living. So, those are the things that we pay attention to at a very high level. And then that's when you start getting the calculators out after those things kind of check.
What are some habits you're disciplined about that have produced the highest return for you?
Transcendental meditation.
What is that?
Transcendental meditation is a mantra-based meditation. Some of your listeners might have heard Ray Dalio talk about it, who I believe, in the public markets is probably the greatest investor of all time. But health, wellness, exercise, meditation, and treating myself like as the business and making sure that I'm showing up as a human being in a certain light and allowing the business to be an extension of the refinement and the dedication to improvement that I have as a person and the people within our team have dedication to themselves and to the team.
What about the number one thing that's contributed to your success?
Luck.
It's hard to recreate luck, hard to count on luck.
Well, it depends how you look at it. Luck is, you've heard all the luck is when preparation meets opportunity. Picasso said luck does happen, but it has to find you working. But there's a certain element too of luck. And when I use that word, it's a very funny truth that the harder I work, the luckier I get, if you know what I mean.
That's no doubt about it. Yeah. How do you like to give back?
I give back inherently through, there's several ways. The Rastigar Family Foundation, there's several mandates. One thing we're very focused on is homelessness in Austin, youth sports, athletics, and health. But really more so than anything is making the business itself built in servitude to where when you're renovating these properties, delivering a Class A experience, delivering, celebrity-like customer service at a price point that is really giving a great end user experience to where the work itself is servitude.
All right. Pleasure to meet you and have you on the show. I know the listeners have learned a lot today. I love just the thought of reimagining, right? What it could be and seeing the future for a community. The example of Kyle, Texas, I thought that was very valuable. And even the working with the city there, right? And thinking about, how helpful they could be, but really going in with the attitude of helping them, right? But even the metrics that you went through as well, I think is a great reminder for most of us to really think about, and what are we tracking? Or what are we looking at? What are those metrics before we go in to try to complete a project like this? How can the listeners get in touch with you and learn more about you?
Sure. They can go to our website, rastigarpropertysingular.com. I kind of laugh that this 12-year-old gentleman in the UK, the New York Post covered it on page 6, reached out to me through Instagram, through LinkedIn, through our website. And we were able to talk. His mother has become, a very dear friend of our family. And we're actually, writing a book together, a children's book together about, instilling healthy habits, goal setting. And I say that just with the example of it's pretty public what we've done, to where a simple Google search, if they really want to find us, wouldn't be too hard.
Thank you for being a loyal listener of the show. Please subscribe and share it with your friends. We want to help you become the passive investor you've always wanted to become, but also the operator you've always wanted to become. We want to be the number one resource for your real estate investing journey. But go to lifebridgecapital.com where you can start investing in real estate today.